started recording.
Okay. This meeting of the Fox River Valley Public Library District Board of Trustees will be held without a quorum of trustees physically present, but is authorized by the Governor of Illinois pursuant to COVID-19 Executive Order Number 5, dated March 16th, 2020, as well as the Governor's Emergency Administrative Act dated June 12th, 2020. As board president, I have determined that an in-person meeting is not prudent at this time due to the coronavirus pandemic that the governor has declared an emergency. A verbatim recording of this meeting will be made available to the public. In addition, Library Director Lauren Rosenthal is physically present at the library for this meeting. Also, the public notice. Due to the current public health concerns and extension of the governor's stay-at-home mandate by the Executive Order 2020-33, this meeting is being conducted electronically. Anyone wishing to observe and/or comment must email libraryboard@foxrivervalleypubliclibrarydistrict.info no later than 12 noon on Tuesday, November 17th, and will receive online access to the meeting. If you do not have electronic access and would like to make a public statement, you can call the library at 847-428-3661 before 5 p.m. on Tuesday, November 17th, and leave a message indicating that you would like your message to be read into the record during the public comment section of the meeting. A recording of this meeting will be available on the library's website by Friday, November 27th. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Dave, have we got you yet? No? Well, we'll start the meeting and Dave can catch up when he gets on. I'd like to call to order the Fox River Valley Public Library District Board of Trustees meeting for November 17th, 2020, and I have it at 7:02 p.m. May we have our flag put up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, everyone, please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, may we have a roll call, please?
Dave? Chris?
Here.
Mike?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
Nikki's here. Christina? Here. And Richard?
Here. Okay, public comment. The board recognizes its responsibility to provide an opportunity for anyone wishing to comment at any meeting to do so. Due to the current public health concerns, the November 17th, 2020 meeting will be conducted electronically. Any person viewing the meeting online and/or wishing to comment will be accommodated in accordance with the public notice detailed above as I have read prior to the start of the meeting. Citizens will not be requested to sign in to comment. Does anyone, whoa. What the hell happened?
What happened, Richard?
I don't know.
We can
Am I
still
still
see
on?
you and hear you.
All right, I thought I lost everybody. Okay, so do we have anyone that's with us electronically that would like to make a comment for the public? Anyone on the telephone? Lauren, do we have any messages?
There were no messages.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the president's report. Well, as we know, tonight is Lauren's last board meeting with us. So the last business item of the evening will be passing a resolution thanking and recognizing Lauren for everything she's done for us, all her accomplishments, which are many. And it's our way of saying thank you for a job well done, Lauren. You've been a marvelous director and deputy director for us, and we're going to miss you, but we understand good opportunity for us, for you. So all the best. The December board meeting. As you can see from the agenda, we have a number of business items to handle tonight. Dealing with these at this meeting will free up the December agenda and allow us to cancel the December meeting. You know, among many reasons for that. We've had a number of long meetings this year, as you all know, and we did not have our annual summer break. Usually take the month of August off, but we had to tend to business in August. And also, probably most important, Roxanne begins as interim director on December 12th. That's only 3 days before the scheduled meeting. And it just does not allow her time to get settled in and prepare for the board meeting. So all things considered, I think it's best if we just cancel the meeting. Does any trustee disagree with that? Okay, then there'll be no December board meeting. The second item I've got has to do with beginning our search for a permanent director. We need to begin a board discussion relating to establish a process for us to search for and hire a permanent director. And in my opinion, the first step in this process is to formulate a plan for the board to use that'll facilitate and guide our search. Now, I have asked Christina, who's our personnel liaison, to take the lead here, and she has agreed to do so. Christina's task will be to develop a search plan and be ready to present it to us at our January meeting. Each board member then will have an opportunity to weigh in on that plan, and hopefully at the end of that discussion, we'll have an agreed upon path forward with projected timelines for us to use as we start out our search. Christina, first of all, thank you for your willingness to take on this assignment. It's going to be quite an assignment. Do you have anything that you'd like to add at this point?
I would just like to say that if anyone has any input into things that you think might be important considerations as I put together a preliminary plan to present to you, or things that you think I should be aware of, priorities you think I should have, please let me know. If you have suggestions of search firms that you think are good options, please let me know. If you have any input, I welcome all of it. So thanks. I hope I will do a good job putting this together for you guys.
Okay, thank you, Christina. I'm sure you will. Is everybody okay with proceeding along this manner? Okay, good. Okay, we'll continue this discussion then in January. With that, I'll turn it over to Lauren for the director's report.
Okay. We're going to start with our guests tonight. We're happy to have Tom McGrath and Ian Lamp from Lamp Construction with us, and Rachel Foley and Joe Huberty from Ingberg Anderson Architects. I'm going to just take a couple of minutes and recap what we've done so far in this process. That you're aware that we hired Anders Dahlgren as a library program consultant back in 2015, and Roxanne and me and the management team and staff and community met with him to talk about what would be needed in a new library or in a remodeled library. And we used that as the basis for architectural renderings back in 2016. That audit didn't actually end up happening. However, we could use all the work that we had done from 2015 and build on it for a 2020 remodel. So if the idea was, if we had a 30,000 square foot library, what would we need in it? Well, generally what we needed in 2015 is the same thing as what we need in 2020. So we kind of tweaked where we had gone with Anders and provided that information to Joe, and that's where we're at. We've met with Joe. Heather and I have met with Joe and Rachel. I think Rachel's probably done an awful lot of the work here. And then we've also met with the management team and gotten a chance to take a look at these drawings. And we had an outstanding session with the management team, visualizing a patron walking into the building. Where's the patron going to go? Yada, yada. And then, made changes from there. So we're really happy with the plans as they stand right now. And we're delighted to get a chance for Tom and Ian and Rachel and Joe to talk to the board about what the next steps might be in this process. So now I'm going to turn it over and thank you guys for coming out.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. I think the idea here is to walk you through a little bit of the process and show you some of the results of that effort as a precursor to the discussion about timeline and probable costs. So I'm going to share my screen. And as we go through this, I recognize there's a time lag between what you see and what I'm talking about. So I'm going to try and go reasonably slow, but not take up the whole evening with a description of the project. So this is really organized into a couple of key components. The first one is really to think about the building as a renovation of the interior spaces.
Joe.
So I'm hoping everyone is seeing an image of a new entry at the northeast corner of the building.
Just real quick, we need to call into attendance. Dave Nutt arrived at 7:13. Thank you. Sorry, Joe.
That's right. Well, let's test Dave right off the bat. Dave, can you see a rendering of the building?
I do, thank you.
All right, awesome. So we took a look at two major concepts. One was to renovate the building within the existing envelope. And being architects, we couldn't help but test that against a small addition to see whether or not tweaking the edge of the building would really free up some of the internal organization and make the building more effective. The goal clearly was to not push the project to the point where we had in 2016, where there was a major addition to the east side of the building along the entire length of that facade. So by no means did we try and expand the building to that extent. But you can imagine that anytime you work with an existing building, there are constraints to work around, and sometimes a little bit of space here or there makes all the difference in the world. And we wanted to see if that was in fact the case in this scenario. So our first discussions are about internal organization with no expansion. And this is one possible sense of what the building might look like in that scenario. When we started the process, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping a few key goals in mind. And we came up with two strategies for this option. The first one was really to manage the library's resources and try and make the most out of the existing building with the least investment in capital improvements. The thought was that the township spaces, which really, I'm going to flip this into there we go, full presentation mode. We wanted to make sure that the township offices, which are located along the top edge of this diagram, could be incorporated in the most effective way. And one thought was to expand the youth services department into that space, because it really is a simple way of removing a few existing walls, upgrading the mechanical systems, bringing in the power and data that would be necessary, and relocate the furnishings, maybe with a few additions, to create a new youth services area. Clearly, our goal was to limit the construction costs. When we looked at that against the program that Lauren and the staff had tweaked from that original Dahlgren document, we noticed that there were a few spaces that really needed to be incorporated into the building at the lower level in order to maximize the utility of the building, that in many ways might not want to be adjacent to that youth services space. So when we looked at putting the youth services at that level, we brought down a hands-on computer lab, the major meeting room, and the teen space as adjacent spaces to youth services. The idea would be that the teens is a transitional space between adult life and life as a child, that both youth services and teens could benefit by proximity to meeting, and that technology lab, be it computers, maker spaces, would find appeal to just about any user of the building. And by locating it off this lower level lobby, we might be able to entice users of multiple generations into that space and take advantage of those services. But we did want to acknowledge that there were issues related to that kind of scenario. In many ways, having users that weren't parents or their children using that floor compromised the focus of the activities on that floor. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Introducing services to non-traditional users, but also diluting the focus of the activities on that floor. At the upper level, we wanted to maximize the amount of space given over to adults. And in these diagrams, the blue represents staff zones, the dark blue is new staff zones, the light blue is reused staff zones, and the yellow is public space. The red rectangles represent vertical transportation. So the big ones are stairs and the small one is our elevator. As I mentioned, the idea was to reuse as much of the existing staff space as possible. On this level, clearly that south edge of the building would be reused as much as possible. There is some concern that your first impression in arriving on the site is to look into the director's office. Not saying anything about your director, past, current, or future, but the idea is that maybe there's a better way to advertise the services by putting some of those in your front window. At the lower level, we were trying to reuse the mechanical corner, which is at the lower left-hand side of the drawing, and then take advantage of the existing meeting room and the west entry to the building for deliveries and create a more centralized service zone that would be primarily staff workspaces. Part of this is to make the public spaces in the building more easily accessible from the primary public stair and that elevator. And part of it is to organize the staff zone along that western edge so that deliveries can be handled quickly without having to move things through a lot of hallways and corridors. That works pretty well in this diagram, with the exception of needing to move materials up to the upper level, in which case we would be bringing things out into that lobby space and then up to the main floor using the elevator. The other thing we wanted to note was that the new workrooms on the upper level were organized in such a way as to present the circulation services to both people arriving by car and taking advantage of the new drive-up services windows, and to people arriving in person and using a new entry point into the building. One of the things we talked about in 2016 that still seems important is to reorient the entry of the building to the parking lot and not have people walk back along the drive lane that they just used to come onto the site and interfere with the drive-up services zone. We're really looking for a much cleaner separation of pedestrian access from vehicular access. But in all of these scenarios, that dark blue band along the east edge of the building is really intended to link those two interaction points with a single staff workroom. Option 2 took a little bit of a different approach and said that we're going to remodel more of the building and maybe engage in more intensive internal construction by virtue of demolishing the existing township spaces, which again are.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To interrupt. Are the slides supposed to be changing?
Yeah, they haven't advanced.
They haven't.
Sorry. Right.
No.
That is a problem. All right, I'm gonna try.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, well, let's stick with this then. Okay, so I'm gonna briefly recap. Option 1 was about reusing as much of the existing township spaces in as simple a way as possible, which was to pull Children's a little farther to the west and move all of that youth services activity more into the northwest corner, and then use the eastern edge of the building for spaces that in some ways are multi-generational, but most often located on an entry level or on a primary adult level or near an entry. So things like meetings would typically be near the front door. Things like the Maker Lab, Computer Lab tend to be on adult levels. And then teens, by virtue of their desire to be thought of as something other than children, are most often located away from Children's. Our idea here was to illustrate a progression of development from Children's through teens and really have everybody come through a lower level arrival zone that might encourage people that wouldn't necessarily think of using the Maker Lab to engage in those services. At the upper level, the yellow is really all about adult services. We tried to maximize the amount of public space that's oriented towards the north, and then open big vistas to that west wall from the new entry. And here's that new staff zone that I was describing that would link drive-up services with the pedestrian access from the parking lot into an entry in your existing northeast corner of the building. And this is that corner I was talking about being the first impression zone. Right now it's staff space, and in this diagram we would keep it as a staff work zone along that south edge. The second strategy was more about reorganizing the building and perhaps building more interior partitions to define a much larger staff work zone, essentially in the township offices zone, and expanding that staff zone that we had in the first diagram into something more significant. And then the remaining space on the lower level would essentially become Children's. There's a small exception to that in that there's a zone here that we're creating and thinking of as a multi-purpose zone, that during the busiest times of the day for youth services, this might be a place to get away and sort of decompress, a space for people that need less stimulation that might be found in the Children's area. Perhaps it's a meeting room. Perhaps it's a space for caregivers and mothers to gather while their youth are in story time or other activities within the library. So we're thinking of it as a multi-purpose zone related to youth services, and then potentially as a second meeting space to support a wider variety of uses. May in fact be committees, homeowners associations, book clubs, anything of that nature. We would really emphasize the nature of access from the west side of the building via a reconfigured stair and ramp that would bring deliveries into the building, and then separate that from the public access to the building and the upper levels. So that upper level tries to reorganize the public spaces so that we grab someone's attention when they first arrive on the site. So the corner of the building that is currently the director's office becomes public space. We keep that staff work zone along the east edge, so the drive-up services and entry are still served by that single workroom. And then we're starting to spin adult services around a new meeting room that's located to be very powerfully located with respect to the entry. And it begins a services that organize themselves around that meeting space. The stairs, some mechanical, the restrooms are tucked into this corner, and create a series of events that wrap around that central meeting space. The advantages of this concept are that more of the upper level becomes available to the public That has a corollary in that more of the staff spaces are located adjacent to that service entry, which is also a plus. We bring the meeting room up out of the lower level and make it more easily accessible. This has an advantage for board meetings, which should be easily accessible public events. It does a much better job of advertising the opportunities for people to engage in a drop-in spontaneous activity, be it a meeting, an exhibit, a craft session. The idea behind the meeting space is that it truly is multi-purpose, and there's a number of support spaces adjacent to it that allow you a great deal of reconfigurable opportunities within that meeting room. And then we're really separating this public level and staff functions from each other. The quick path to use services via the main stair or the elevator, you arrive directly into those kinds of spaces. And so the notion of wandering through a corridor really is given up. This was a strategy that we thought had the greatest potential, and this is the one that you'll see developed from here on out. So I want to point out that we've turned our drawing. This is typically a no-no in the architectural world, but the building has been rotated so the north is now toward the top of the slide. And so parking would be just off the image in this area. The township offices are highlighted in yellow here. This is clearly an existing plan. And this is the west side of the building where we talked about the service entry really taking advantage of both the ramp and the stair. Our thought is to keep those in their current location, but to rebuild them based on their current condition. So one of the key goals of this project was to make better use of that space. Right now, you're sort of using it in its original configuration. And it is nice to have that space available in some form, but clearly there are more effective ways to put that space to use in serving the community. So I don't want to lose track of the fact that we are really making better use of the space than you can currently accomplish given the interior arrangement. In that transformation, that large centralized staff work zone highlighted here in blue, we've laid out in some detail. As Lauren mentioned, there was a considerable amount of effort that went into the 2016 program that has been tailored to match the constraints of size of the current facility. So there are a few smaller offices, a few less workstations, a few less seats in things like the staff lounge. But for the most part, we've really managed to accomplish all of the things that were set out in terms of defining an effective staff work zone. And there's a series of spaces here that I'd like to highlight. This one in the upper left corner is the youth services zone, and it's positioned to have connectivity to the youth services public space. There's another zone along the edge of the building, along the west edge, that really is about central support space, director, assistant director, business office, things of that nature. There's a copy center that supports everyone, human resources. All of that is located in a central staff zone along that west edge. There's some workshops and storage space that are general building support, facilities management, that sort of thing. There's new staff restrooms. It's really updating the existing restrooms, new fixtures, new finishes, make sure that they're accessible, compliant with current codes. And then a much smaller arrival lobby. It really is just a vestibule airlock. And then along the south edge of the building, we've got the acquisitions and technical services workspaces, the staff lounge, a nursing room for staff, general building storage, and then that multi-purpose room that we've labeled conference space here. In some ways, this can be used by anybody, but we're really zoning it so that it's easily accessible to the public without having to go into or through youth services. There's a couple of restrooms just outside of that. These again are refurbished, reconditioned. And then there's two new restrooms just to the north of that would be directly in support of youth services and are intended to be gender neutral and bring our plumbing count up to meet the current Illinois plumbing statutes. There's a couple new study rooms that are actually carved into what was township space, and you can see the additional space garnered by youth services in the public zone. So a pretty significant increase in the capabilities and efficiencies of the staff spaces, and I think a pretty densely effective use of the township work zone. I want to highlight the areas that are really reclaimed for the public, and those are the yellow areas here. And then to think about those in terms of their utility. Some of the spaces that are missing in most contemporary libraries, and one of the things that was highlighted in the Dahlgren program, are these smaller group activity spaces. These can be thought of as either quiet or active, but the idea is that there's some separation from what's going on in the rest of the department. Same is true for that multi-purpose space. So these have utility beyond the floor area that's garnered within each of the spaces. One of the other key elements in the program, both in 2016 and in this round of planning, is to focus on the storytelling and active learning capabilities within the space. So there's two spaces highlighted up in the upper right-hand corner. The far upper right-hand corner is a much larger storytime room. It's divisible if we wanted to make it that way. We've really shown this in this current configuration as a single large activity space that could have multiple zones. There's some storage space in here so that you can start to empty out the space and really have some large-scale aerobic kinds of things, or do a more traditional story time and craft. But we've got table, chair, AV storage, sink, work counter, and then some light from the outside. And then immediately adjacent to that is the hands-on learning, active play, kind of the emergency literacy zone. That really is the precursor to a number of literacy-focused programs. As we work our way around the circle, it's grade school, media collections, and then working our way out, it's the youngest children with board books, picture books, things of that nature. We've got a centralized public service point that can keep control over people in the active learning zone, views to the back corner, views to the study room, views to a technology zone. You can keep an eye on the entry to the restrooms, and then of course the arrival zone coming into the space. Lots of little nooks here, fun ways to enter the building, excuse me, the department, fun ways to enter the active learning space, fun little nooks for gathering small groups, and then quiet places to find that more reflective space, even in the youth services department. On the upper level, again, we're trying to emphasize the public nature of this floor. It's important to note that there are some key staff spaces on this level. And when we talk about gaining the south edge of the building as an active public zone, we are locating a few staff elements in that area. One is a dividing element that separates the computer lab maker zone from the information technologies workroom. This is really located so that it can support the technology-rich computer lab maker kind of zone. And it's located directly above the servers, so the connectivity is really maximized. Quick connection via the elevator or the stairs, so those are joined in a pretty effective way. And this separator really allows us to create a teen zone that has some identity of its own. It's easy to get to by taking a path from the entry through a very active area to that teen collection. And it's overseen by the adult services workroom, which is the other blue rectangle shown on this diagram. But aside from those spaces and our circulation workroom, a lot of this, as you'll see, is focused on the public. That next piece, and I mentioned this in the diagramming phase, is that centralized workroom, meeting room. And so this is positioned so that when you enter the building, you've got a pretty clear line of sight through the arrival zone to a big entry portal that is intended to welcome people into that space. There's enough separation here so that when an event is going on and you really want to focus, that there aren't distractions from people using the rest of the library. But it also affords you the opportunity to open that eastern wall in a way that if it is a much more informal, hopefully encouraging spontaneous drop in, or if it's something of an exhibit, some sort of gala, that you have that opportunity to think about either spill out or happy discovery, the serendipitous find, because that wall is open and the events really flow between that interior space and the rest of the building. As I mentioned, there's support spaces, kitchenette, storage, equipment room, so that this active space for exhibits or community gathering really can be emptied out if necessary. That is connected to the entry by a series of pretty active elements. Our thought is that the building will have multiple characters based on the multiple needs of people coming into the space at any given time. And so there's an active zone that we've highlighted here in yellow. Part of that is the stair connection to youth services. There'll be a lot of people coming into the building and through this space, taking that path to the lower level. There'll be a lot of people coming in and taking advantage of the meeting room space. And because it's designated as active, we're thinking this is the path that will bring people back to the teen zone. And that's really the logic behind the meet and greet functions at the entry. There's a security system, there's self-checks, there's a lot of new material display, and it's really the first bit of the marketplace that's really there to entice the most curated of your collections. Really some social gathering spaces, all very flexible. This, in fact, could be an extension of your exhibit zone if things want to spill out. General gallery display, a little bit of vending for that light refreshment kind of thing. We've reorganized the restrooms and expanded them to the north to get our fixture count up again. So this is really the arrival, decompression, a taste of everything we have to offer kind of linkage element. And it's really open, and it's intended to make it easy for people to connect to all of the different zones within the building, not just on this floor. In contrast to that, there's a few quieter and really focused reflective spaces in the building. We've tried to pull these away from some of the more active spaces. The quiet reading room, quiet study room is the clearest example of that. We've got a larger group study room that's located as part of an organizing pin around which collections will flow. And then we've got a few quieter, smaller study spaces that are buffered from the teen zone by a series of booths. This is really intended to be one of those dual purpose kind of zones. Certain times of day, I would envision these as being pretty active. Other times of day, when there aren't teens in this zone, a different day part, I could see this really being populated by people that are really seeking that quieter piece of the building. And so we've for the most part, really separated these quieter spaces from the more active edge. And this is the one that tries to have it both ways. In between all of that is a significant collection space. With all of this space devoted to doing things, it's important to note that collections still remain one of the primary resources that you make available to the community. And the effort here has been to present that collection in a way that makes it easier to use, but also allows you to maintain a certain capacity for growth. And so the concept is to take the lighter yellow spaces and introduce slightly lower shelving. This is about 5.5 feet tall, and really use it to merchandise much of the collection. And then to have a portion of the floor support taller stacks. These are still a little bit shorter than the collection display shelving that you have today. I think we're at 84 inches in this diagram compared to 90. So it's a little bit more open, but the idea is to find a balance between merchandising the collection and providing a depth of resource that the community will find enjoyable. So when we take that approach as diagrammed here, we can accommodate everything you have today in a more browsable arrangement and still provide 10% growth across the building's collection. There's a lot of work here that still has to be done in terms of specifically defining exactly what goes where. But in the initial analysis by staff, I think some of these labels really do start to make sense, both in terms of adjacency to quiet zones and the ability to support collections of certain sizes. But this is one of the things that will continue to be massaged when the project moves ahead. All of this is really predicated on an arrival sequence that begins at that northeast corner of the building. And so there's a new arrangement of ramps and stairs that collect you at the corner of the parking lot and brings you up into a new vestibule that has automated materials return into the sorting machine. This is the reconfigured unit. There's workspace here for staff to introduce other elements. There's a friendly smiling face immediately inside the building to help you on your way in, or if you're having trouble with the self-checks, to help you on your way out. But this is a key element, not just in terms of connectivity to the parking lot, which is going to be much more user-friendly, but also in terms of orienting you to kind of where do you go next. And that's really the rationale behind having enough open space to get your bearings, see where you want to go, stop and ask a question if you need to, not impose on someone who's asking a question of the library staff, and just feel like it's a gracious arrival sequence. Behind all of that is the circulation work zone. You can see the blue highlights the sorting machine, an area for book truck storage, a small repair zone. There's a drive-up pickup room here that allows people to pick up and return materials, drive up, pick up, or drop off into a single workroom. And that's located off of that central workspace. Town services manager is in the corner here next to the stair, and then a little workroom. And so the pathway to the elevator is pretty direct. The connection out to the primary collection zones on the upper level is pretty direct. And the need to connect both to the drive-through areas and the material return is satisfied by this location. So I'm going to take a breath here. That's a lot to go through, and if there's questions on the sort of plan diagrams, we can address those. There's more of the presentation that goes into repairs to the building and what it might look like, and an expansion strategy. But I wanted to stop here and see if anybody has questions on this to this point.
Yeah, Joe, I have a question.
Yeah.
The size of the meeting room that you're showing in the central part of the upper level,
Yes.
how does that compare to the existing meeting room that's in the lower level now?
Right. It's slightly larger in terms of its width. We've taken up a little bit of that for aisle space. We're really projecting that cheek to cheek, you might get 60, but a more reasonable capacity is probably 55, 54 people range in chairs, comfortably spaced.
Okay. Okay. Lauren, how many of our programs that we would put on would require anything larger than that capacity?
I don't think we would require larger than that. We've had the giant things we had some princess programs that would be over 100, but then we wouldn't have, a lot of chairs out. It would be more sort of come and go and stations kind of a thing. So, and then because this larger meeting room would be upstairs, the majority of programs used in this would be for the adult and teen departments. And then of course, board meetings would be held in this one, but downstairs that integrated story time room in the department, I think would be used more for, because it's so that the downstairs meeting room for children's is so much larger than the craft room. That's going to be used for the large bulk of children's programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that size meeting room would fit in well with what we anticipate going on.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good.
Okay, we can come back at any point. I did want to point out that in this scenario, while we're trying to reorganize the interior of the building, we are acknowledging that there's work outside of the building. The roof is one of those elements. It needs to be watertight for a change. Because we're going to be repairing so much of the surface, this is an opportunity, and actually it's a requirement to meet the current energy code. So there'll be additional insulation as part of this new roof replacement. And so you'll garner the benefits of improved energy efficiency, but clearly the biggest improvement will be that your interior is protected from the elements. So that is part of the basic project. We've also looked at modifying the site slightly. You can see that because of the drive-through services, that there's a fair amount of work involved on the east side of the building to make that drive-through work, to allow bypass traffic to go directly into the parking zone. This eastern edge would really be envisioned as one way in. We're showing some work to rebuild a section of the parking zone immediately adjacent to the building, and then doing general repairs out in the farther reaches of the parking zone, and then tweaking the outbound. This is actually a two-way traffic is possible along this edge, but conceptually we're thinking about it as a big loop around the building. If you want to come in from the west, that is still possible. We're just really trying to avoid people heading back out to the street along the east edge of the building. I mentioned that there's work involved to rebuild the ramp and then the stairs along this edge, and then there's a sidewalk along the drive lane that really needs to be addressed. So those are part of the project at this point. We also wanted to look at the exterior of the building. There are some tuck pointing issues we want to address, and then replace the sealants at all of the soft joints around the building. This too will help your energy efficiency. It will really limit the ability of water to find its way into the wall assembly, which I'm sure you can imagine will extend the life of the building and reduce environmental hazards. And so all of that is just really prudent care of the building, and is thought of as a precursor to doing any of the internal modifications. So that was our base project, and at that point, Tom and Ian really put pencil to paper and tried to think about everything that was implied in our drawings. In fairness to them, we gave them the handful of sketches that you see here and a narrative that basically said, do a good job. There's actually a little bit more than that, but we really asked them to project quite a bit in terms of the costs here. So ambiguities to a certain extent are our responsibility. The level of detail in the backup to this was really pretty impressive. And I'll let them walk through the concept cost summaries.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Am I unmuted? Thanks, Joe. That was a good description of the overall project so far. As Joe mentioned, we've been working on, took these drawings for a couple weeks now, been working on going through, updating, or trying to put a cost estimate together to kind of give you a reference on where this project is going as far as a budget wise. We've had multiple conversations with Joe and Rachel, kind of going over things, making sure we're on the same page. And, you know, this is a schematic estimate at this time. You know, we did our best to try to fill in all the gaps and plug in allowances where we could, just to kind of give you an overall big picture of the project. So this first step, we kind of broke it down into every trade package that we could probably envision on this project. You know, over time, these might combine or split off into different ones, but for now, just to kind of give you the detail, we try to keep them all kind of separate, just so you can kind of see where we're carrying dollars and how they're all kind of made up. I'll quickly kind of run through each line item, just with a very quick 1 or 2 word summary on what is involved in each of these lines. If there's any questions, if I'm moving too fast, please stop me or we can recap. Again, you know, demolition, the first line item, pretty straightforward, just kind of gutting the entire interior of the building, the lower level and the first floor. Asbestos abatement, inlet abatement. There was some notes in the one of the reports about some of the asbestos tile may have been just covered up in one of the past renovations. So to do this properly, we'll actually have to go in and really actually abate that product the right way, get it out of there before we can do any new flooring work or really any work in the building as far as demolition goes. So we're trying to take our best guess at kind of how much is in there. There'll probably need to be, some more investigation as to how much. We're kind of figuring about maybe half the building. Roughly, we're working with about 30,000 square feet of the building, 15 per floor. It's kind of the rough numbers. So we kind of thought about maybe half of that was kind of a baseline to start with, just for this first schematic estimate. So we're trying to carry dollars for that. Building concrete, kind of a smaller number. It is more footings and foundations for the exterior canopy that's going in. There's really no new building concrete work as far as the base bid goes. Maybe some, patching some floor here or there, but for the most part, that would be the footings and foundations for the canopies. The masonry work, again, kind of minimal at this time, just more miscellaneous patching and repairs. There's everything on the inside is drywall. We don't have any new masonry walls, so that would just be kind of patches as we need to. So that number could fluctuate once the design gets going a little bit farther. Structural steel, again, just more the canopy and some miscellaneous support steel here or there that we need in the building to create the new plan, but nothing new real structural wise other than that canopy. General trades is kind of a big catch-all number. Includes everything from, the doors, frames, and hardware, any carpentry work, window treatments, toilet accessories, toilet partitions, marker boards, signage. A lot of that kind of miscellaneous stuff kind of gets dropped into this number. Exterior signage, interior graphics, those sorts of things that we're carrying right now. The roofing, complete removal and replacement of the roof. That's what Joe talked about there on his last couple slides. Aluminum, glass, and glazing.
Wait a minute,
pretty much.
Tom,
Yeah.
Tom, Mike Tennis here. I have a question on the roofing.
Of course.
As I understand it, the current roof was installed in 2012 and had a 20-year guarantee on it. So we're only 8 years into the roof, and I understand we've had roofing problems, but I question why we would have to invest another $316,000 in an 8-year-old roof, discarding that and probably having to write off, Lauren probably having to write off a substantial sum of money that's on the books.
Yeah, I understand that was brought up in one of our meetings with Lauren. I don't know really, can Lauren chime in at all about maybe going, I can't remember where that was left with.
Yeah, we've had a roofing consultant out last week. I mean, they've been doing a bunch of tests. Last week he did a water test. They found some spots where the roof is absorbing water, and they're not, first they've gone through a lot of theories, including the product itself, the roofing product itself failing, but I think that now they're leaning towards there were mistakes in construction, and that not all of the roofing layers have been layered the way they were supposed to be. So this is still an ongoing investigation.
Lauren, if I understand it, that the 20-year guarantee includes workmanship, which would probably address that. I would think with a good attorney, we have some kind of a recourse for what Tom is suggesting would be a huge loss on an 8-year-old investment.
Yep, that's certainly something that I anticipate 2021 bringing. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, maybe that's a cost that can then come down at some point if you're able to recoup some of that. But for now, just kind of where we stand. If it needs to be part of the project, that's kind of what it would be on our end is at this time. Aluminum, glass, and glazing. This is, I think, there's some glass walls kind of in some of the meeting rooms, some of the breakout rooms. That kind of incorporates that number. Drywall is pretty much all just the new interior walls, first and second floors. Acoustic ceilings, it's all new acoustic ceiling throughout. Flooring, a new flooring throughout. And a lot of carpet, maybe some rubber tile, ceramic wall tile in the bathrooms. So all that's included in that number. Painting's pretty straightforward, just painting everything, all brand new. Really nothing yet for miscellaneous equipment. I kind of left it there as a placeholder for myself in case something kind of came up. But I think we have pretty much everything covered at this time. So nothing really for that yet. Casework is all the millwork cabinets kind of throughout the space. That's all included in there. At this time, we don't envision any work on the elevator. Again, I just kind of left it blank just so kind of everybody knows that it's in good working order. We will put some new flooring in it, I believe. But other than that, we believe it's in good working condition, so we shouldn't have to work with it. Fire protection. This is basically new sprinklers within the I'm sorry. Yep. So jump into the next slide here. Sorry, it gets kind of lengthy, so thanks for splitting it into 2 slides. It makes it easier to read. The fire protection, just bringing it up to code. We need new fire sprinklers throughout the entire building. So this is all the sprinklers throughout the spaces. Plumbing, the new restrooms, redoing some of the existing restrooms, and then also some new roof drains to kind of help the water get down off of the roof, which may alleviate some of your future issues as well. HVAC and test and balance are both kind of one and the same. Heating and cooling of the new space. I believe for the base bid, we're keeping the existing equipment on the roof, but this would be replacing all the ductwork, new controls and kind of heating and cooling the space as needed. Electrical is basically all just new power outlets, lighting throughout the space for the new configurations, along with low voltage, all the data ports, AV locations, stuff like that you need is in that number. And then we kind of get back out to the site excavation. A lot of this is more just site demolition, kind of regrading the drives, removing the driveways to be repaved. Which goes into asphalt paving, which is mainly the 2 main drives coming up the side, kind of hooking onto the canopy now, and then maybe some rework in that in those few stalls just is that to the north of the main entrance. Site concrete, mainly replacing all the most of the curbs that go along with those drives, replacing some of the sidewalks that are in poor shape, and that new ramp kind of coming up the west side as well. Fencing's pretty minimal, just it's the new trash enclosure that we'll create. Landscaping's pretty basic, just more seed and blanket or sod to kind of for the disturbed areas, and maybe some plantings where they're needed. And then site utilities, that's the majority of that's probably the new water main coming into the building for the new fire protection. They got to run a new line from the street into the building. So it's the majority of that cost, and then maybe looking at some new storm sewers to kind of help your parking lot drain as well. So that's kind of the quick rundown of all the trade packages that we're kind of looking at on this project. The subtotal of that is, the 4.8 that you can see circled in orange there. Before we jump to the next slide, any questions?
Mike, yes, I have a question. Mike Tennis again. You indicated no work on the elevator except for the flooring. The building is 46 years old, constructed in 1974. I don't know if the elevator was part of the original construction or not. As far as I know, the elevator has had a history of mechanical and electrical problems, and the most significant recent investment was in 2016, where the hydraulic elevator, they put in a new oil pump, and I just wonder if it's prudent to assume that the elevator is good to go, other than putting in a new flooring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joe?
Well, I was going to say that the typical problems we encounter are controls and the hydraulics. The pump is one of the primary elements that would be suspect. The other thing we would wonder about is the casing for the shaft. Make sure that system is tight. We've had no indication from any of the inspections that the cylinder is suspect. That's something that might be prudent to address now with another test. But for the most part, with that 2016 pump replacement, things do seem to be in reasonable condition. The next threshold would be trying to make it more compliant with current size requirements. We would be typically looking to get a stretcher with extensions for supporting equipment, IV, things of that nature, to fit within the cab. So that's significantly larger than typical ADA compliant floor space. You can imagine that that involves shaft modifications and a lot of structural work. And it's typically not required. So that we could look at that as an upgrade. But the big thing of note is really that pump. That's the number one thing we see fail. And then after that, it's the control system within the cab.
Joe, if we were to have that as an alternative to consider, it's something what, in the neighborhood of 75 to 100,000?
That would get us pretty close to an all new elevator.
So the question, I guess, then is it worth investing for an all new elevator?
Yeah, I think it's worth more detailed investigation in terms of the condition of the various components that make up the entire elevator to make that evaluation. I would try and reuse your recently replaced pump, but the other elements, check the casings, check the guides, check the control system. All of that can be evaluated to make that determination.
Okay, thank you.
I think that would be prudent.
Okay. Any other questions on the individual trade packages before we skip to the totals?
Yeah, this is Richard. I have one question on the lead and the asbestos abatement. You mentioned about floor tile. Is there any indication that other areas, pipes wrapped with asbestos, I mean, could this become a larger project than what we're thinking in terms of the abatement?
Yeah,
in
some ways it could. I think one of the next steps, if these large scale numbers are palatable, and the concept is in keeping with your strategic goals for the building and your portfolio of buildings, then I think the next steps would involve more specific testing to make that determination. Okay. We've come across a few documents that lead us to believe that certain materials are very likely to be encountered, but it doesn't exclude the possibility that there's something in the building, in particular in those township spaces, that would add to this kind of issue.
Joe, Richard, Mike Tennis here. District 300, LAMP has worked with District 300 in a lot of asbestos abatement. Hopefully the estimate is a reasonable one and there's no surprises. I haven't heard in the last couple of years of any real surprises when LAMP estimates costs for abatement in the various schools that they've been remediating.
Okay.
This is Rachel. I can actually update you quickly because we did have some someone come out and do some sample testing. They haven't given me the report yet, but they just left me, they just called me today to tell me that there was not as much asbestos as they had thought. So there's nothing in the pipes. It is just the mastic and the flooring. And it sounds like it's mostly just that old township area. So the number should be, yeah, over what we would actually need.
Okay.
That would be happy news.
Yeah.
Richard, would it be out of line for me to ask a question? I know I'm not on board yet.
Sure, go ahead, Roxanne.
I'm curious as to whether the quote for updating the sprinklering includes putting in new lines, because when the 2009 renovation was done, the building was not sprinklered. So there are no sprinklers currently throughout the entire building.
Yeah, so this would include an entire new system in the building. The piping, the head, yeah, the sprinklers themselves, yeah, everywhere through and then that site utility number is what I mentioned that at the end there. That includes bringing the water service into the actual building, and then the fire sprinkler takes it from there.
Right, thanks.
Okay, so then just to kind of summarize the rest of the estimate here, we kind of break it down into lamps up front sort of fees, the pre-construction of our general conditions, the supervision office. General conditions of the supervision include kind of our office of project management superintendent, things we need to run the project accordingly. And then project general conditions include things that are needed on the actual project site to complete its, safety, temporary walls, cleaning up the spaces, dumpsters, all those sorts of things kind of add up into that. Then our fees and insurance. At this time, we're carrying a construction and design contingency. Each of those are 5% a piece right now on the trade package totals. As we kind of keep moving forward throughout the design contingency will start to shrink as we kind of stop, making assumptions as things are verified in more detail. And then we would probably like to hold that construction contingency as close to 5 as we could. Being a renovation project, you never quite know what you're going to uncover. There's always going to be surprises. Do the best we can to catch all those, but there's always things that come up. So we'd like to carry that contingency moving into construction as well. And then that next section is the architect fees, civil engineering fees, reimbursables, and then the final line. Right now, we're trying to carry any owner costs or FF&E items that we could anticipate on this project. The majority of it would be the FF&E in that number: furniture, shelvings. Other things are utilities, like whether it's ComEd, Nicor, any miscellaneous costs from them, AT&T or Comcast, whoever the other utilities might be. We try to encapsulate all those fees just so you kind of have a big picture, all-in number here at the bottom, which is that 7.3 that we're sitting at right now. And that's kind of our end goal, is to kind of give you, one list for the entire project of everything included. So that's where we're at right now with the overall project total. You guys, any kind of questions on that section there that I just ran through?
Tom, Mike Tennis again. Back in 2016, when we were initially planning, and I was involved with the Citizen Task Force, the initial number that came up for the Dundee Library was, I think it was about $9.1 million, if I remember correctly. And the overall project, including a new library, totaled $39.5 million. And then it was scaled back about 40%. And from some handwritten notes I found, in a meeting with Ian and Joe, I think it was late June, the estimate at that time was the Dundee Library would be scaled back to about $4.3 million. Now we're looking at $3 million more, and I'm not sure what's changed in 4 years other than a $3 million increase in price. I know that the original $9.1 million, I think, included about 2,500 square feet of new frontage, adding space in the front of the building. And so I'm just trying to understand the huge price differential of $7.3 million versus the $4.3 million that was the downsized number that we were counting on for the referendum should it have passed.
Okay, yeah, I'm not, oh, sorry, somebody turned.
Me.
Oh, Ian, sorry. Ian?
Yeah, no, I would say, Mike, it was, when we scaled it back, you know, you were having problems with the roof then, and I think we just said, okay, that's a warranty issue. We're not doing anything with the roof. There's 300,000 there right then and there. You've got about 3 to 5% inflation over the past years. Plus the fact that I think that the one thing we're doing was going to go back in and do some fluff and stuff, expanded the township area, and probably pretty much keep everything, maybe add a new entryway, and then probably not do much of the parking lot because the parking lot was better shape 4 years ago than it is today. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. But we still have all that detail, but that's just off the top of my head. And my top of my head is getting fuller and fuller, so I'm trying to recall. But the gray is showing, the experience is showing.
Now that you mentioned the parking lot, Ian, I was also looking back at some of the history and the part of the, I think it may be in the alternates that's being proposed, so I'll save that for later. Never mind.
But Mike, we'll look it up for you, and I'll get you an email the next day or two out. I'll send it to Lauren, and she can just disseminate to the group, but what the differences were.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments on the estimate to this point? It's admittedly a big number. I think I think everybody had the same questions Mike had in terms of reference points back to 2016 and the various versions there. I think Ian's comment about the scope of the interior renovation is really what rings true for me at the point of really needing to scale it back. Our approach was claim the township and keep the rest of the building really pretty simple. And in this approach, admittedly, we're looking at this in the scenario 2 as a let's reorganize the building in an optimal way to support service moving forward. And that's really the big test with both the drawings and this estimate.
Yeah, the only thing I do remember, there was no drive-up window. That was just not a priority for us prior to COVID. Now with COVID, it's the #1 priority.
We lopped all of that off, right? Okay. We can come back to this, and I think the remaining slides give you some context for this version of the project. The small addition we're talking about is really highlighted in yellow here. And the thought is that by relocating the drive-up pickup service point farther north, that we can reorganize that corner of the building, pull the vestibule out a little bit, and create a different series of spaces that make for a more effective space, both in terms of the maneuvering zone. The entry sequence is a little bit more direct. It allows us to tuck public service points to the other side of the entry. This gives us more queuing space in front of and to the side of without blocking the pathway in. And the other move in this scenario is to take out the, next, I'll come back to this. You can see this in the rendering. We've come farther out. So this is the extension of the workroom, and the vestibule is outside the existing corner of the building. Gives us a little bit more flexibility. It gives us a bit more of an opportunity to make a statement. but the big impact is on the inside of the building with that bigger space at the entry. We're pairing that with the notion that we can reorganize the building so that our second egress path is back out to the east through the existing stair. The existing internal stair, I think it was a matter of egress for the township because there was a separation in uses within the building. And in terms of egress from the existing building, it's a little confusing. People don't think of internal stairs as egress paths. And that floor space is really pretty useful. We're far enough from a point of entry, which would also be a point of egress, so that this counts as a legal exit. And because it's on the perimeter, people will think of it as an egress path. And because it lets you exit the building, if you come back up the stair at this point, it's actually very helpful. It lets us introduce more functional space in the middle of the building, and it frees up more floor space where we had our larger group study room to be collection space, or if you prefer, seating space, computer space, larger meeting room, whatever it happens to be. We get some more internal space to use for public functions. On the lower level, we get to introduce one of the elements that have been clipped out of the program, which is a small staff conference room that takes the pressure off of one of the other gathering spaces within the building and keeps them available more frequently for public use. And so I'm looking at that with all of the markups, the estimated cost of those efforts is about $130,000. So that's one of the options, and that one was really focused on trying to get a better plan layout. A second group of alternates is focused on what we would consider an improved customer experience, and that's to introduce more natural light into the building. We're thinking of this both in terms of views in, but primarily views out. So the areas that are highlighted in red are pieces of the building that are being transformed from something solid to something transparent, more windows around the building. And so the views to the north, this is looking out over the parking lot toward the wetland. This is our west elevation. So you can see the staff entry. We're adding a little window here for an office space. We're adding some windows into what would be the adult services workroom. When you look at the south elevation, this is the elevation that faces Highway 68. We're adding more glass so that we get a bigger front window to show off what's going on inside the building. A little bit of light being admitted into the public zones all along this edge, and then light into the staff spaces at the lower level. Admittedly, there's some work here to get all of that cut through the foundation wall, and the LAMP team has actually priced these as a series of improvements on 4 of the elevations. If you were interested in all 4 sides having the additional glass, that's what tallies the $220,000 worth of additional improvements. I think it's important to note that we're doing some work to reseal all of the joints, address any of the potential leak points around the perimeter of the glazing as part of the base bid. And that's a separate line from all of this new work. And this 220,000 item doesn't include whatever we do at the entry. That's all included in the entry number. So when you look at the plan, the yellow highlights show kind of the areas where we're focusing the additional windows. At the lower level, it's a little bit into the staff workroom and then into the PATS workroom. You know, workroom is a place to get away. Natural light would be pleasant there. The workroom is a place where people spend considerable parts of their day. So that would be of significant value in terms of productivity as well as satisfaction. A director's office without a window is hard to contemplate in terms of recruiting. At the upper level, you know, we're really talking about maximizing the view and the light to the north. This is the side of the building where it's easiest to control natural light. We don't have a lot of solar gain We do have to make sure that we're not freezing people out with the northwest winter wind, but that's where the potential views are. I mentioned a little bit of light into the adult services workroom, and then the other pieces of glass are really in the activity room along the south, and then a little bit into the IT workspaces. There are a series of improvements that are grouped together as modernizing the HVAC system. One of the things we'd really like you to consider is a building automation system, which is really to replace all of the various components of a pneumatic system. You can imagine that this affects a lot of elements: control, energy efficiency, comfort. It really makes it easier to do troubleshooting. And it's one of those things that if you're investing this much in a building, you really would want a more contemporary control system for the building's mechanical system. It's also the time to consider whether or not the current approach to mechanicals is prudent. In many ways, the existing system offers an awful lot of redundancy that a more traditional library system would not offer. It's hard to imagine enough of those RTUs going down such that you would really impact your ability to operate the facility. Whereas with 2 new rooftop units that would serve the entire building, if one of those does go down for one reason or another, it really places some strain on the other one, and you may not in fact be able to maintain effective occupancy within the building. These systems, the larger RTUs tend to be pretty effective, pretty efficient, relatively easy to service, although they do require more training and knowledge than the almost residential scale units that you have now. There is significant life left in the existing rooftop units, and our mechanical engineer's opinion is that there is nothing untoward or unseemly about continuing to use those. Our distribution system is designed to take advantage of that. So the number Tom was talking about in terms of distribution from the rooftop units really is intended to take advantage of the current units and does not depend on the new rooftop units. So this is one where for us it's pretty hard to recommend that you make this investment at this point. The benefits kind of open to some interpretation. The cost is pretty significant, and there is significant remaining within the current units. When it does come time to replace those units, it's more likely that you would do those on an as-need basis. It's hard to imagine that there ever is an ideal time where they're all close to failing, and you would think about making the switch to a fewer, more commercial, institutional scaled units. So I don't know if there's ever really a good time to contemplate this, but we thought it was worth investigation. And then the last one is to implement some sort of filtration for the mechanical system that goes beyond typical filtering. In this case, we're looking at UV filters. There's some other ionic polarization options that might be equivalent in cost and could serve a similar effect. It's important to note that none of these are 100% effective, that you're bringing in lots of potential contaminant sources with every person that enters the building. And these are all ways to help mitigate the spread of whatever is brought into the building. They do improve general air quality, but not a magic bullet. But in looking at this, not exactly a huge cost either. So something for the library to consider. If we start thinking about all of the glazing that we're adding to the building in one of the alternates, we have to think about the capacity of the existing system to provide heat along the perimeter. And some of your electrical panels are at the edge of being capable of taking that additional load. And the engineer is suggesting that if we go that route, he would seriously suggest that we consider increasing the capacity of 2 of the electrical panels to make sure that we have that capacity and a little spare for whatever comes along down the road that might require additional power. So we're calling this modernize the electrical system, but in many ways it's buying capacity for future uses in the case of adding windows to the building, because we will consume any remaining capacity on the electrical system to provide supplemental heat at those window locations. The next group is really about site improvements. There is a concept that suggests reorganizing a little bit of the site where the sort of the hook on the number one, I think of this as a big number one kind of site that you own, kind of looking at the shaded area as a way to increase the parking lot count, primarily for your use, but we do want to acknowledge that people come to your site and access Wahoo Woods, which is in many ways a great thing, but we do want to acknowledge that those cars are competing for your users, with your users for parking access. So we think we can get an additional 14 spaces for that effort. The additional rework, drainage, curb and gutter, a little bit of demo, the new paving, markings, things of that sort, just under $40,000 in this scenario. And then instead of just upgrading the asphalt just south of the building, we would rebuild that, remove all of the existing surface layers, add some stone, recompact, and then repave new base and top coats of asphalt pavement markings. Yeah.
Joe McKenna's here. As I understand it, the area you're suggesting to replace asphalt was just done 6 years ago in 2014, along with some sidewalk slabs.
Okay. I will double check that with our civil engineer. He thought this was the piece that needed the most attention.
Yeah, I think in 2014, we replaced the back and the middle, but not the front.
That would be consistent with the observations that we've made and that are being described by our civil engineer. But it's worth double checking.
I can add, we did some, they did resurface that and they took it down a number of inches, but they didn't dig the whole thing up and redo the base. And that area closest to the building was the area that was most degraded at that time, but we opted from a cost standpoint not to go all the way down and totally replace it.
Okay.
The other, can I add one? I have a quick question about the cistern, Joe.
Okay.
At that northeast corner of the building, there is, right there, there's an underground water catch basin. And if you're looking at site work in that area, is that something you've looked at, or?
That is something we would be looking at as part of the entry reconfiguration, whether there's an addition or not. We're planning on some site work to try and make it a more accessible pathway into the building. So that area would be impacted in any scenario.
Okay.
We're cognizant of the drainage issues that go along with all of that. So
good.
Without knowing specifically what we're going to do, I gotta think that that's gonna be impacted. Okay. Tom, do you want to walk us through the quick summary?
Yeah, these are the same numbers you had up above on each of the slides, correct, Joe? Yeah,
right.
So this just kind of breaks, kind of summarizes them more just along with our format from up above. The Group A alternates, you know, the improved operational effectiveness, as Joe kind of went over on each of those, the vestibule, and then infill in interior stairs. Group B, improved building experience, replacing the storefront windows on the outside. Group C1 provide systems. So we're kind of just like Joe mentioned, just kind of grouping them in. You know, that would make sense to do together if we wanted to entertain these alternates. Group C2 is the modern electrical systems, upgrading some of those. Group D, correct, stabilize, and expand the site improvements. And Group F is the aesthetic improvements. So a lot of these, depending on how we want to move forward, seem to be, I'd say, relatively easy alternates to incorporate into the bidding environment. Like if we're going out to bid with a base bid, listing these, they're separate enough where contractors can price them easy. You know, if you're unsure if it's anything you want to entertain, we can ask for the alternate price, and then it's you know, always a lot easier to make the decision when you have a hard locked-in number from a contractor, you know, during the bid, than us, you know, kind of taking our best estimate and trying to give you an idea there. But like I said, a lot of these are pretty straightforward, easy alternates for contractors to price up as they're pricing the base bid of the project. So, you know, we can dive into those in more detail at a later time if you know once we kind of start moving down that more into the design development stage of what alternates we want to start trying to take a look at.
Tom, I have a question on Group F, the aesthetic improvements with the phenolic panels. If I understand the terminology correctly, I think the fascia was just done in 2012, and aren't we talking about the same thing? The panels and the fascia?
Yeah, I believe so. Joe, correct me if I'm right.
Yep.
It's the upper 3 feet of the building, or you know, it was at 2 to 3 feet of the building. So what are they, metal now? And then maybe I don't know if you have any renderings and what it might look. You know, just more of a phenolic is a I don't know if you go with like a wood look sort of, or what your plan was there, Joe. But probably something a little more modern than the metal at this time.
Right.
Okay.
That one,
Joe, did we see any deterioration in the fascia?
no.
Okay.
This is totally aesthetic.
Thank you.
Totally elective. I think the building will look good either way. Feels a little bit more contemporary and permanent with the phenolic than with the corrugated metal. And so that was really, we almost took this off the list. But thought that should be a decision you all make.
I just want to mention, in meeting with the managers, the Group A vestibule addition and improved drive-up window was universally desired by all the management team. It improves the workflow for the account services department and just provides that, I think, just a greatly improved flow for patrons when they walk into the building. So I'm gonna get my cheer in for Group A.
Yeah, Joe, this is Richard. I have a question on the parking lot, specifically the lighting. It's always seemed to me that at night, that parking lot, especially as you get to the farther northern part, to the back part of the parking lot, it's always seemed like it was dark to me. Mm-hmm. Do you guys see much of a cost, and do we need to do much with the lighting as you see it right now?
We could take a look at that. We just bid out a similar area for Crystal Lake to replace all their lighting to make it a little bit more uniform. Go to LED fixtures, we get better light distribution, better longevity, lower energy consumption. And it was about $30,000 to put new poles and fixtures on their existing bases. And we're seeing pretty good photometrics from that effort. So if it's something you want us to take a look at, do a photometric study and see what new fixtures might be able to do, we can certainly do that as part of the next design phase.
Richard, Mike Tennis here.
Yeah.
That the original, well, there were in 1999, the existing parking lot lighting went in, and Lauren, I thought recently Michael just went through a retrofit of that lighting for LED.
I think they were the lights, the exterior lights attached to the building. I'm not sure if all the poles did.
Yeah, there was some something that prevented an easy conversion on the poles.
Yeah.
And but even with that, when you get to the far end of that parking lot, there isn't much light back there. It really is kind of dark, and it's just adjacent to that woods, and I would like to see that area brighter.
Okay.
From a safety standpoint. Staff tends to park back there, and I think it's would warrant some further investigation.
Okay. Other questions on any of these alternates? If not, the other thing we'd like to talk a little bit about is the schedule. So I think the estimate was based on what I would call a moderate approach. And maybe Tom and Ian, you want to talk through potential phasing and what an alternate timeline might look like?
Yeah, so on the that third kind of group down there, the construction timeline, you know, I think in our preliminary discussions we talked about starting in September, you know, right after your kind of summer busy season, and starting probably in the lower level. If you can move entirely out of that and give us that entire space all at once, we could knock out that area in about the first 5 months of the project. And then we would basically stop for a month, let you guys move from the first floor back down into the lower level, or however you guys wanted to rearrange. And again, give us that entire first floor. And then it'd be another, 5 months or so to kind of renovate that area. If you chose to do the addition alternate, we could probably incorporate it in that with that second phase as well. Along with some of the site work. So that's kind of the what Joe mentioned, the moderate approach that we decided to look at. And then the alternate would be, heavily relying on staff, obviously, is if you moved out of the building entirely and let us have both the lower level first floor site all together, we're probably looking at closer to the 7-month range, just to knock it all out at the same time. Instead of kind of starting back up and, first stopping, and then turning the building back over. So that's kind of the rough preliminary timeline that we looked at. Again, obviously we'll, as design develops and we get further into it, we'll fine tune this a little bit more than just a few blocks on a chart. But just to give you kind of the big picture is kind of what we're looking at right now.
Just to confirm, that is out of the library for that entire 7 months.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. You can imagine that there's potential savings there, but there's also potential impact to the public. I think it's a little bit different evaluation given what you've recently gone through and might be going through again. So you might be better prepared to handle something like this, but it's one of those evaluations that is not just monetary. But we did want to bring it to everyone's attention. We recognize these are pretty big numbers. There's always a desire to deliver the project in an economical way, and ideally to achieve the economy without sacrificing long-term performance. So it's another aspect of the evaluation of both price and scope of work.
Brian, Mike Tennis here. Just as a reference point, maybe there's some lessons to be learned from Indian Trails. When they went through their renovation and expansion, they were closed for, I think, a year.
I don't know the exact length, but that was the approach, and there's a number of libraries that have done that.
And we do have the Randall Oaks Library, so
Right.
even if we were to close Dundee, we wouldn't stop service.
Does this save us anything construction cost-wise by allowing the work to be done more efficiently and in 4 months fewer?
Yeah, it certainly could. It would take off of our general conditions, our supervision numbers. And then depending on the trades, they might give you, just being there all at once, getting the work done all at the same time instead of remobilization costs. You'll definitely save money on that.
Okay.
It's hard to put a dollar to it right now without knowing the entire scope and, kind of when we do it, but we can certainly try to get you some ballpark numbers, if that's something you guys want to entertain. We can start looking at those numbers a little bit for you.
The other part of the schedule is more precursors to either one of those strategies. We're kind of at the midpoint of November. If you were inclined to move ahead with this, I think we'd want to do a little coordinating with the Village of East Dundee, and then move into more detailed work. As we've mentioned on a couple of these items, there's probably some investigation that needs to be done to be more precise, and then touch base again with you. But the general intent would be to take this concept and develop it towards a more specific set of drawings that could be estimated again and then developed into biddable, constructible drawings. And you see that outlined in the design row.
Does anyone have any other questions on any aspect of the presentation from Joe or Tom or anyone?
Richard, Mike Tennis here. Looking back at in terms of how we got to this presentation this evening, Lauren, if memory serves me, I think back in July, what you were advocating was to develop a conceptual design to possibly seek state funding as a shovel-ready program, and it seems that we've achieved that at this point.
Yes, I was hopeful that if the income tax amendment was going to pass, that maybe Springfield would go on a spending spree. But since it didn't pass, there's yeah.
Okay.
I don't see anything happening.
I agree. I don't think they'll be handing out any money soon. But it was prudent to get to move the project to the point that we have it now, so that if that eventuality would have occurred, we could have stepped right up and said, here we are. So, well, does anyone have any other questions for our presenters? Okay, well, gentlemen and Rachel, thank you very much for taking us through this. There's an awful lot of information that we took in tonight. I must say that some of the renderings of the entranceway are really really impressive. I think that takes a building that's very utilitarian and put some life to it. And I think people would be proud to walk into a building with an entryway like that. So anyway, thank you. It's up to us now to evaluate all this, work with staff to determine what actually we want and our needs, and whether we want to try to do this concurrent with operating the building or shutting it down and using Randall Oaks to its most effective to bide us time. Those are things we're going to have to discuss over the next few weeks.
Right. Well, if there's any questions along the way, your entire team is ready to to help sort through that.
Yeah, well, good. Thank you very much. You've put the whole project is put in perspective, including the time frame, and that's something important for us to consider. So, Lauren, do we need to address anything else along this line?
I would just like to mention, I know that I know there's some sticker shock. This is a large project, but as Joe mentioned, this is an imagining of what library service should be looking like. This is the way patrons want to use the library now. So we're really happy with this, with where we're at. The other thing I want to mention, right, is this board has been very fiscally prudent for years and have amassed some very significant reserves. We usually do a cash flow schedule in January, but I put it together early and gave it to Brian, so he is aware that we do have reserves that will cover the vast majority of a construction project. And I also looked up our debt limit, and based on where EAV is right now, we can carry $60 million in debt. So even if we were to take a small loan, whether we can issue bonds for loan or we can go to First American for a loan, this is all very doable. And so I mean, I don't want to get into the minutia of it, but I don't want the dollar figure that you just saw to be a barrier to thinking about the possibilities. This is affordable for us. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, point well taken.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Again,
everyone.
thanks a lot, everyone, for your time and information, and we'll be getting back to you probably in January when we have a chance to meet again, and by that time Roxanne will have had a chance to get conversant with this project, and we'll be able to start moving ahead.
Sounds good. Well, then, happy holidays, all.
Yeah,
Have a
happy
great
holidays.
holiday. Thank you. Best of luck, Lauren.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Lauren, what's next?
I
Wait,
would
can
like
I just say one thing? That totally reminded me of when Joanna Gaines sits there with the homeowners and shows them all these amazing projects and then is like, but you can only afford one. And I'm like, no, I want them all.
Exactly.
I just thought I'd mention that.
I love that show. So before we still have department reports and dashboard, but really quick, I would like to defer to Heather because, you know, we went to tier 2 last week. King County caseloads are over 18%. And then just today, the governor changed us to tier 3, or starting on Friday, we'll be at tier 3. And we did have our first staff member test positive, and that led to some quarantining of staff as well. So we did make the move back to delivery and curbside. And Heather has led that actually what happened was Richard and I talked about it and said, okay. And so then I said to Heather, okay, now we need to do this. So Heather has handled all this. So she's going to let you know how this has been going.
So we started with curbside yesterday. We have limited hours for curbside. It is 9 to 4 p.m. And that is because we don't want staff outside when the sun is down, and it does get quite dark by 4 p.m. We have expanded our, I'm going to call them summer lunches, but it is cold suppers. We were doing them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we decided to expand them to 5 days a week. Are available from 3 to 5. So if people do pull up at like 4:45 p.m., we will give them supper, and that is because it's significantly easier than some of the transactions that we're doing through curbside. The kind of transactions that we have available through curbside is expanded from what we did over the summer. People can pull up and just ask for materials that we have on shelf and we will pull them. It does not have to be a pre-existing hold for service. However, we've gone completely contactless. Before, staff were bringing items out to patrons' cars, but because of worry about virus spreading that way, we're just putting them on the table and then the patron gets out of their car and grabs them from the table. We're continuing with free printing, which we did with curbside before, and that's still extremely popular. It's probably our second biggest service that we're doing right now. And there, people are emailing library notice, and then we're printing out the documents and putting them in a folder, and people can come and pick them up. For the first couple days, we've been extraordinarily busy between phone calls and then people showing up for curbside service. Prior, when we had done curbside in the summer, it was quieter, but I think people have gotten used to going to the library again, so I think that's why we're more popular. This time out, we have a much more limited staff in the building. At maximum, we're at about 8 public service staff dedicated to that. And that is only in the afternoon when we are doing the summer meals, because we have to have a site supervisor for the summer meals on staff in. We have 3 people dedicated to doing curbside, and we call that a phone shift. And then we have 3 people dedicated to doing pick list, which includes arranging materials for delivery, pulling items for holds, shelving materials. Is basically like a catch-all for everything else is pick list. Then we have 1 person who is just there to answer reference questions. And then there's the site supervisor, which is a 2-hour shift in the afternoon. Additionally, we'll have 1 pick on staff, just in case any issues arise, and to help staff troubleshoot. So I think
yeah. Are you offering any other services like the notary services, or, I mean, license plate renewals don't need to happen right now because that got, I think, delayed, but okay, just wondered, because one of the things that I was going to highlight from the director reports was how many staff is now and how popular it is.
Yeah, sadly we can't do notary service, which is a shame because we're excited to have all these new notaries on staff. Right. But we look forward to resuming that as soon as we can. It's just hard to do that without contact.
Right.
Have you expanded the meals to 5 days from 2 because of an overwhelming interest in that? Or it's just a value added service and because we can do it, we're going to do it?
The latter. It's also, we feel bad that we had a greater number of hours before. We were like, I want to say it was 3 to 7, and now we're only able to do 3 to 5. So we wanted to make up for that by offering it more times a week for people.
Gotcha. That's great.
Do you keep track of how many you go through? I can't remember. Okay.
We only got it yesterday. It wasn't advertised, so we did not go through that many yesterday.
Mike Tennis here with a question about notarizing. Petitions require notarizing, and I remember in the spring I had some county documents that I had to file that required notarizing, and I had to wait for quite a while, and fortunately they extended the time. But as far as petition filings, how do you get a petition notarized?
For the library board election, we will continue to take those. I mean, we'll have Karen Worley and Mary Pavlonis as a backup for library board petitions. Those will be notarized.
Thank you.
Heather and Lauren, with going back to curbside service, what impact does that have on the current staff? Have you had to put anyone back on furlough?
No, structuring it this way, we could use all the shelvers and clerks that were still employed, and the folks that, you know, really were able to work from home, the people that are creating the great videos and conducting the virtual programs and doing collection management. We're keeping, you know, we're keeping those staff safe at home and doing the work that they can do. And then the shelvers and clerks, and then of course, you know, a pick and a reference person. We have those folks in the building doing the curbside service. So we're able to keep all the folks employed that were formerly employed and able to offer all the services that we need to be offering. So it's worked out well.
Good, that's good to hear. And of course, we have no idea how long this will go. It just depends on how things go with the virus. So.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not out on a limb here. I mean, from at this point, I think every library has gone to curbside. Even the people that last Thursday were dug in their heels and said, we're not changing back. Literally, even those people emailed today and said, with the governor's statement, yeah, so.
Okay.
Good, thank you, Heather,
I
for
just-
that impromptu. Yeah. Sorry.
Chris Evans.
Any other questions for Heather? Okay, well, thank you, Heather.
I think Chris Evans had a
question
question.
Oh, Chris?
I'm not sure whether this goes with quite here, but Lauren, you were talking about videos and things, and I noticed in the report that you were still trying to do your virtual tours for second grade for District 300. And I wondered, does that also include Sunny Hill at District 220?
Yes, we've always had Sunny Hill out here, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, I just, because that wasn't in the report and I wanted to make sure they were included.
Yeah, I think Monica just assumed it. Sorry, she couldn't make it tonight or I would have her chime in, but yes, it's my understanding. Sunny Hill has always been included with the second grade visit.
I knew they were, but I wanted to make sure. And
No,
as
so
long as I'm unmuted, I just want to say how thrilled I was, the effort we're going to meet the changing demographics and ethnicities of our library. I think that is just, I smiled when I read that in the report, because, you know, we look around our trustee board and we're pretty white bread, and I'm really pleased that our library staff is looking out for that and cognizant of the fact that we have a very, very diverse community that uses our services. So, yay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. So then that's a great segue. Thank you, Chris. That's a great segue into department reports and dashboard, if there were any questions about either of those.
I didn't have a question, but I wanted to call out a couple things that I was very impressed with. I love the number of staff that are now volunteering or are on boards. I thought it was Carrie, it was Kirsten, it was John. I thought that was fantastic, stepping into, which is one of the goals of the library. And then 12 plate renewals in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Like, obviously a need filled, which was fantastic. And then I thought the library pairing.
I think I was one of those, Nikki.
Oh yeah, nice, very nice. And then the library pairings. I thought that was a really cute way of highlighting, you know, restaurants that are doing carry out and delivery and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of really good things. Like, that's not the only thing, like what Chris was saying about the diversity and all that kind of stuff. But those are things that just I wanted to highlight and say great job to all the staff that's been working on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I gotta say,
Yeah,
it
the
means a lot to
Instagram
staff.
campaign is very cool.
The staff does watch this video afterwards, so it does mean a lot to them whenever there's a shout out like that. So thank you, please. You know, I just want to make sure you know everything's different with this video. Staff is a lot more involved in tracking what, you know, the board meetings. So yeah, thank you for saying that. All right, then we'll move on.
So we're all set to proceed to the consent agenda. Before I do that, does anyone have any other questions before we leave this topic of the dashboard department reports? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Before I ask for a motion for the consent agenda items, are there any items that a trustee would like left out of the consent agenda motion? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items Exhibit A1 through A1L. May I have such a motion, please?
I move.
Okay, Christina moves. Second, please.
Mike
Brian will
Tennis.
second.
I think I heard Mike Tennis. I think I heard you pop in there first. There's a second. Nikki, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
Richard.
Yes. Okay, there's no unfinished business tonight, so we'll move on to new business. Exhibit C1, Ordinance 2020-10, levying taxes for fiscal year 2020 to 2021. May I have a motion to adopt the Ordinance 2020-10, levying taxes in the amount of $3,650,000 for fiscal year 2020-2021?
So moved. It's Brian.
Brian, second, please.
Second.
Second,
Dave.
Chris.
I heard Dave.
Dave, yeah. Okay, this is the ordinance that allows us to actually levy the taxes that for the, previously we had approved the budget and appropriation ordinance in September. And now this ordinance will allow us to actually levy those taxes. Is there anything else to be mentioned, Lauren?
The amount in this ordinance is the same as the amount that we talked about last month in the estimate of funds needed. So last month we did the whole justification based on estimated EAV. This is how much we were expecting to get, and this does that estimate of funds needed kept us under 5%, so we didn't have to do the T to hearing. So it's basically a rehashing of what we decided last month.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the ordinance?
Just one, Richard.
Mike?
Let the record show the amount is $3,650,000.
Yes, that was in the motion that I suggested. $3,650,000. Nikki, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
and Richard.
Yes. Okay, item C2, annual treasurer's report. May I have a motion to approve the annual treasurer's report?
So moved. Dave.
Dave's motion, second, please.
I'll second. That's Nikki.
Nikki seconded. Okay, this is the report that we're required to file. That is our annual statement of receipts and disbursements. I know Mike has a few questions, but before we get to that, Brian, do you have any comments on this report?
Actually, Richard, I could take the time here to address Mike's questions. Lauren and I did have time to connect earlier in the week. So Mike had a few questions. One about the payroll increase year over year, given the pandemic and the fact that we furloughed staff towards the end of last fiscal year. The question was, why was payroll up 63,000 or 4%? And it's really more just due to the fact we really didn't have staff vacancies nearly to the level that we'd had in previous years. We ran pretty much at full staff the entire year, combined with the annual year-over-year salary increases that overrode any small savings that we had at the very end of the fiscal year through the furloughs. So that was the payroll question. Question on material disbursements. Baker and Taylor had been the primary vendor, and the disbursements for fiscal year 2020, they were down over 100,000 over the previous year. And it really was just shifted to another vendor, Ingram, who we purchased a lot of our materials from this past year that was not in previous years.
Can I just point out, Brian, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to point out that payroll issue or non-issue, actually lack of an issue, because it means that we were operating at full staff, is exactly why we never want to move budget from payroll to surplus or wherever, because we're figuring that we're not going to run a full staff. So I just wanted to point out that I know that we had discussed that at length, but here we are however many months later, and it's a good thing that we didn't do that, because we would look like we were out of budget and not responsible had we done something like that. So I wanted to make note of that real quick. Sorry, go on.
Okay. Mike, I had a question about the cooperative computer services. Our disbursements there were actually down year over year. And this one really was because they ended up refunding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Lauren, yeah, at the end of the year, any surplus back to the participating districts. So we actually received a surplus at the end of the year to offset some of the payments we've made during the year. And that will be carrying forward. So really, this 2020 was the first year that we saw that money coming back, but that's how they're going to operate going forward. And then the last question was the North Suburban Digital Exchange. We actually were up quite a bit in fiscal year 2020, and that is the ebooks, and it's on a per title basis. And really, just I think it's impacts some of just the shifting trends of our patrons, but especially during the pandemic, there was more demand for ebooks than previously. So that explained that delta.
Thank you, Brian. And Lauren.
Any other questions or comments on the treasurer's report? Hearing none, Nikki, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
Richard.
Yes. Okay, moving on to item C3. May I have a motion to accept the comprehensive annual financial report, commonly called CAFR, for fiscal year 2019-2020?
Mike Dennis, so move.
Second, please.
Second, Dave.
Dave seconded. Okay, the CAFR report was presented by our auditors last month. There were a few suggested changes that Mike had requested. We've had a couple of iterations back and forth. I assume all your questions have been answered satisfactorily, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, are there any other comments on the CAFR before we go to a vote? Okay, hearing none, can we have a roll call vote on this matter, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
Richard.
Yes. Moving on to item C4, report of our closed session minute review and destruction of audio recordings. May I have a motion to approve the report of the closed session minutes review open November 29, 2016, February 21, 2017, October 17, 2017, April 21st, 2020, May 19th, 2020, June 16th, 2020, July 21st, 2020, and August 18, 2020. Executive session minutes and destruction of all audio recordings made prior to April 20th of 2019. May I have such a motion?
So moved.
And it was a mouthful. And second, please.
Second, Chris Evans.
Chris.
Dave motioned that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Nikki, why don't you just briefly describe what this report does?
So this report is, I reviewed all of the closed session minutes. We have to do that every 6 months, and recommend opening all of the ones that from the 2016 and 2017 talked about the property we were attempting to buy for the hopefully the referendum passed, and then the ones from 2020 are all related to our thoughts about trying to locate a property to put to referendum this year. And so I recommend opening all of those. And so this report is basically just stating that, and then we only have to keep audio recordings for 18 months. So it's recommending what date that we can get rid of those audio recordings from.
Okay, and it's worth noting that all those minutes that are referenced in the motion were also included in the consent agenda. So all of those are there. Any questions, comments on the report? Hearing none, Nikki, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Nikki is yes. Christina.
Yes.
And Richard.
Yes. Okay, item C5. May I have a motion to adopt resolution 2020-11, authorizing the library board president and treasurer and the interim library district director to sign all documents reasonably necessary to add Roxanne Bennett and remove Lauren Rosenthal as signatories on the library financial accounts effective December 12th, 2020. May I have such a motion?
Mike
So
Kennis, so move. I'll second.
Was that Brian who motioned?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Brian. Thanks,
Okay. This resolution just allows us to change those that have signature authority, removing Lauren and replacing him with Roxanne, effective December 12th, which is Roxanne's first day on the job. Any comments, questions on this? Hearing none, Nikki, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Brian. I think that was a yes. Somebody coughed.
Yes.
Thanks, Brian. Nikki is yes. Sorry, Christina. I'm waiting for you to say yes. I hadn't said your name yet. Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes. Okay, moving on to item C6. May I have a motion to adopt resolution 2020-12 to appoint interim director Roxanne Bennett, authorized Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, IMRF, as our agent effective December 12th, 2020.
So moved. Nikki.
Second, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Seconded. Okay, this just replaces, takes Lauren's name off of as our authorized agent and places Roxanne on as our authorized agent. Any questions, comments on this? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
I'll say everybody's name this time. Dave.
Dave.
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
and Richard.
Yes. Okay, item C7. May I have a motion to adopt ordinance 2020-13, Library District holiday closings for 2021?
So moved. Dave.
Dave with the motion. Second, please.
Seconded, Chris.
Chris seconded.
Seconded, Chris.
Okay, this is the normal listing of closings for the library. It's the same as this past year, and nothing new here. Any questions, comments on this? May we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
and Richard.
Yes. Okay, moving on to C8. May I have a motion that for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, I move to grant employees who are required to self-quarantine per CDC guidelines to receive regular pay for normal hours worked for the 14-day period while staying at home and staying safe. May I have such a motion, please?
So moved. Dave.
Dave,
Second, Chris Evans.
second on Chris. Okay, by way of a little background on this, and I think either Lauren or Heather can speak to this. We had, was it one of our employees that came down with COVID, or an associate or a friend of theirs or something? Lauren, why don't you go ahead with it?
It was an employee tested positive.
Okay, and that resulted in some of our employees having to self-quarantine at home.
Correct.
Now those that have, that can work from home can still, accomplish that without any loss of pay. The problem is that, as I understand it, there were a couple of shelvers or clerks that were involved whose job cannot really be done from home.
Exactly.
Those were the ones, as you know, when we first had our furlough, those were the employees that we furloughed because they could not reasonably do their job from home. So now they've come back, and we're faced now with at least once some employees being sent home who are losing their pay because of that, through no fault of their own. They're following the CDC guidelines. They're doing everything that they're supposed to. And I personally believe that we should support them by paying them for the 14 days, their regular rate of pay for the normal hours, no excess pay, but keeping them whole from a financial standpoint while they're doing the right thing. I'll throw it open for any comments for this.
It seems like if we don't do this, then isn't there maybe an incentive for an employee who's exposed to just not report it and continue to show up for work, exposing others?
Yeah. Exactly. We want everybody to stay safe, and we don't want them to be in a position where it's a trade-off between losing pay or staying safe. I think we can do both.
I guess the only question I would have is, given the closing of the library for physical service, will these folks have like sort of work for them at the end of the 2 weeks, assuming that we're still in this phase of mitigation?
Oh, yeah, we'll need them at Dundee. We've already talked to
Yeah.
them about, but yeah, Randall Oak staff will be working here. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, may we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Dave,
You're really faint now, Nikki. I don't know why.
I didn't hear you, Nikki.
Nikki, we cannot hear you. There you go.
She's working.
how do I sound now?
Really
Wait.
faint. Just yell.
I know I'm first.
Hold on. Won't let me switch my microphone. Hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Do I sound normal? Because I'm not yelling. Or am I still quiet?
You sound pretty normal.
Okay, thank you.
It's better.
All right, start over. Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes. Christina,
Yes.
George.
Yes, sorry. Okay, going on to item C9. May I have a motion to appoint Library Interim Director Roxanne Bennett and Executive Assistant Karen Worley as our FOIA officers for the Fox River Valley Public Library District effective December 12th, 2020.
So moved. Dave.
Dave, second please.
Second.
Chris. Okay, again, this is just a clerical thing to appoint Roxanne as one of our FOIA officers. We'd like to have two so that someone is always in a position to respond as quickly as possible. Any discussion or questions on this?
Just one comment, Mike Tennis.
Yes.
District 300 publishes their FOIA request. I've never seen any publication. Maybe there hasn't been any requests for the library. If there are requests, will the board be notified of it?
We get requests all the time. We've never thought about publishing them. They're almost always commercial.
Is there any requirement for us to publish them?
No.
No?
No.
If they're almost all commercial, I find it interesting following District 300 because there's a lot of media people, for example, that submit FOIA requests.
Oh, I don't recall ever getting one from the media. There's some guy, they want our purchase orders, every quarter we get one of those. We get something from Better Government that wants salaries once a year. That's about it. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, Nikki, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Okay, I'm checking. Can you hear me? Or did I go quiet again? Okay, hold on. Oh, no. No?
Now we can.
Okay. Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes. Christina,
Yes.
Richard.
Yes. Okay, moving on to C10. May I have a motion to appoint Business Office Specialist Mary Povolonis and Executive Assistant Karen Worley as Deputy Clerks to accept trustee nominating positions for the Office of Library Trustee?
So moved.
Dave has made the motion. Second, please.
Ms. Brian.
Brian, second. Okay, these two ladies would be our deputies. Normally, it's established that the secretary receives those, but from a practical standpoint, we need deputies to do that. So that's the suggestion, is to have Mary and Karen perform that. Now, is Mary a notary?
No, after I said that, I was like, well, Mary's not going to actually notarize. Mary's just there in the event that Karen gets sick. So, I mean, I think that Mary would, since she's to be deputized per this action, that she could collect the stuff and then Karen could notarize it later. I think is how it works. I'm not exactly sure on that.
No, it really needs to be done at the time of signing.
Well, we've only ever had one notary. I mean, it's only ever been Karen Worley, and then the backup has never been someone that was a notary. So this isn't any different than any other year. I guess if you wanted to modify it and have a notary, we could change it from Mary to someone else that is a notary. We got a lot of notaries.
I'm just thinking with limited staff, if a trustee comes in, it would be nice to have both of the deputies being able to do the entire task, given the state of affairs with the library right now.
Well, let's change it then from Mary Pavlonis to Jason Katzian, who recently became a notary, and he's here a lot. And while I certainly don't want Karen to get sick, in the middle of a pandemic, preparing for someone to get sick is, it's not unreasonable. I mean, of all years, we need to be cautious. This is the year we need to be cautious. So yeah, having two notaries makes a lot of sense.
Lauren, if I could just interject, Jason took the training, but he is not yet a notary. He was a brand new trainee. He's not commissioned yet.
To be by the end of December, though?
There's no way I can predict that. I don't think so, just because that's just a month away. And with COVID, things are slowing down with the Secretary of State who has to process this and everything. And we do have other notaries. There's Vanessa, there's Jasmine, there's several at ATS.
We would want full time. So,
Hi, this is
Jasmine.
Could I recommend Erica Acevedo? She's full-time and she's done more notary interactions than anyone else within my department. I think she would be ideal.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. I'm sorry, I forgot you were listening in on all this. So let's scratch Mary Pavlonis and put Erica Acevedo. Then we've got two seasoned notaries and full-timers.
Would you spell the last name, please?
Acevedo.
Okay, so we'll modify that motion to include Erica Acevedo in place of Mary Provolonis. Okay. Any discussion, questions on this? Both of them are notaries, so they should be able to cover this duty. Okay, Nikki, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Brian. Brian, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Nikki is yes. Christina.
Yes.
And Richard.
Yes. Okay, now we come to C11. May I have a motion to adopt resolution 2020-14 honoring Lauren Rosenthal?
So moved, Brian.
Brian?
And Nikki.
Second, Chris Evans.
Was that Chris that seconded or Nikki?
I seconded it first.
Okay,
Oh,
it was Nikki.
I seconded it first. I'm easily amused.
Okay, well, Lauren, this is our chance and our way of saying thank you for everything that you've done for us, everything you've done for the district. You're an amazing administrator. You command the respect of the staff. You command the respect of this board. It's just been an absolute pleasure working with you. And we want to wish you all the best in the future. I think I speak for everybody on this board when I say you deserve all the success that you can achieve. You are one of the better. You are one of the best. One of the best. So, as is our case, I would ask the secretary to read this resolution, and then we will vote on it. Nikki?
I should have put this large. So, Resolution 2024-14 honoring Lauren Rosenthal. Whereas Lauren Rosenthal ably served as Assistant Director of Support Services for the Fox River Valley Public Library District from January 2014 until October 2016, Deputy Director until June 2019, and Director of the Library District through mid-December 2020. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal demonstrated exceptional financial acumen in budgeting and updating fiscal policies, working together with the business office to earn one of the first Government Finance Officers Association awards for excellence in financial reporting given to libraries. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal was instrumental in selection of a comprehensive, scalable system for financial management and informed decision-making. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal continued the library's emphasis on transparency through contracting to be the first library in the nation to present financial and operational information to the public in a user-friendly, interactive format, paving the way for all libraries. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal worked tirelessly to provide information and support to the Library Board of Trustees in long-range planning and library expansion and planning for renovation of the East Side facility. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal served on various committees and boards advocating for good stewardship of library district property and service to the community. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal cultivated valuable community partnerships and participated extensively in outreach throughout the district and in seeking patron feedback. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal, always mindful of community needs, oversaw a revamping of library services and programs to comply with safe opening guidelines during an unprecedented service disruption, introducing home delivery of library materials, license plate renewals, elimination of some late fees, expanded notary public service, and initiated and expanded USDA free meal services to area residents. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal determinedly strove to bring additional sources of revenue to the library, and whereas Lauren Rosenthal played a pivotal role in strategic planning, hiring practices, and leadership that fostered enthusiasm and teamwork at Fox River Valley Public Library District. And whereas Lauren Rosenthal provided valuable insight and mentoring to all who worked with and for her, therefore be it resolved that in recognition and appreciation of her service to the Fox River Valley Public Library District, the Board of Trustees, on behalf of the residents, staff, and themselves, present Lauren this resolution, and be it further resolved that on this, the 17th day of November, 2020, this resolution be presented to her and that its contents to be spread upon the minutes of this organization.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Well, there's the resolution. It's captured probably not everything that Lauren has accomplished, but certainly the highlights of her career here at our library. Any comments from any of the trustees before we vote on this?
I just want to say thank you, Lauren, and thank you for all that you've done, but as well as helping me, educating me as a trustee. So thank you for everything.
It's been a pleasure working with you, Lauren. We will miss you at the library.
Anyone else?
I think your leadership is amazing. And since I'm kind of still a newbie, I always felt like you came to the meeting so well prepared and so open. Always, I just felt like we were always in good hands. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you, and it's really been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Are we ready for a vote? Okay, may we have a roll call vote, Nikki, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, didn't hear you.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
and Richard.
A resounding yes. So it's unanimous. Thank you very much, Lauren. And well, you'll be with us for a few more weeks. Yeah, let's give her.
Thank you. That was very generous of you. Thank you.
You'll be with us for a few more weeks, so we'll be able to hopefully stop in and personally extend our thanks and good wishes as you move on to your next assignment.
And I will be back. Like I said, I'm so excited for these plans. I look forward to seeing them taking shape over time.
And if they don't treat you right there at the new place, there's always a home for you back here.
That's so kind of you. Thank you.
Okay. That concludes our business for tonight. We won't meet again until after the first of the year. We'll have our interim director will be in place. So we'll start a new year with our search for a new director, a new permanent director. And in the meantime, we're in good hands with Roxanne to keep the library moving forward. Any final comments from anyone tonight? Okay,
Everybody
hearing none.
have a safe holiday season. All the employees have a safe holiday season. And everybody take care, really.
Yeah.
Stay safe and well. Yep, safe and well.
Be careful and stay well. This is so scary. And I really applaud everything the library's doing to accommodate our pandemic. I think you guys have been amazing. So I just hope everybody stays well and has wonderful holidays.
I echo that as well, Chris. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Brian.
I heard Brian.
Brian moved. Was it Mike? Did you second?
Second, yes.
Okay. May we have a roll call vote on adjournment, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki is yes, Christina,
Yes.
and Richard.
Yes. We are adjourned as of 9:37.